Uh, Concerning appearance and reality is part of application and is seen as Bertrand Russell, who lived between 1872 to 1970. Bertrand Arthur William Russell was a British philosopher like John Stuart Mill, whom we have considered, and he was a logician, mathematician, historian, and social critic. Now look at what these guys were doing. Again, he was a philosopher. Logician is also a philosopher, but the mathematician is another line. You can also see he was a historian, my friends, and he was a social critic. Can you see? Yeah, these are the professors of the time who were not just one person. They were mathematicians, historians, social critic. In other words, he took academia seriously. He did not go by my line is this one. At least he's not the person you could ask a question and he tells you, I don't know anything mathematics. I don't know anything geography. My friend, how do you study history without a map of Africa or map of the world? Now, but anyway, I want to talk about his philosophical concept in critical and creative thinking. That is what is important. Not the historical bit, but it's good for us, at least to humanize and the class as a social science class or human science class. Now, when you look at appearance, he would tell you, because I don't want to get into the details of it, I just want to tell and summarize these characters today. He would argue what you see is not necessarily the reality. What appears, that is a conclusion, the bottom line. The argument of Bertrand Russell is to tell you philosophically that what you see is not necessarily what is very real. It's not necessarily the reality. Go dig deeper. Don't be a fellow pushed by the gossips and believe the gossips. Africa is full of, a lot of talking, and sometimes if you are not careful, you may be taken by the bandwagon. And there are people who have become experts in these things, particularly the political mood. You hear stories that are really strange, not known even by the person it is attributed to. Even once, you get ones coming from you, if you are a politician. And I'm not saying something strange. We are here, we know these things. At various points in his life, Bertrand Russell considered himself a liberal. Other times he considered himself a socialist. And other times he considered himself a pacifist. But he also admitted that he had never been any of these in any profound sense. He was born in Monmouthshire, UK, into one of the most prominent aristocratic families in Britain. Russell led the British revolt against idealism in the early 20th century and is considered one of the founders of analytic philosophy, along with his predecessor Gottlob Frege and his protege Ludwig Wittgenstein, or actually Wittgenstein is a German name, Wittgenstein. He is widely held to be one of the 20th century premier logicians. He co-authored with A.N. Whitehead the book in Latin, Principia Mathematica, an attempt to ground mathematics on logic. And he went on and on. Remember, he was a historian also. Remember, he was a philosopher also. All that. And did great exploits. But coming back to the bottom line, is the theory of appearance and reality. Logically, he was able to prove that unless you go for experimental, do your experimental work, what appears can be deceptive. Yes, if you are marrying somebody, don't just conclude she is good, he is good. Take time, my friend. Some of the good people don't appear good initially. Yes, what appears is not necessarily the reality. Engage somebody, talk to somebody, give yourself time. Talk until you know the person. Because people don't behave the way they initially look. Yes, you may come with your own perspectives and judge somebody very quickly, and you may find yourself, disappointed. Bertrand Rousseau later campaigned against Adolf Hitler, then criticized Stalinist totalitarianism, attacked the involvement of the United States of America in the Vietnam War, and was an outspoken proponent of nuclear disarmament. Now, in 1950, Rousseau was awarded the Nobel Prize in Literature in recognition of his varied and significant writings in which he champions humanitarian ideals and freedom of thought. Now, in pursuing all these things, he appealed to critical and creative thinking. That always, when you see something, think critically. Ask yourself handy question. What, why, how? Don't just conclude, because what appears is not necessarily the reality. It may be or it may be not. And most of the time, what appears initially is not the reality. As a university professor, he could look from, he was staying in a tall story building. And when he was on top, before he planned to cascade downwards, he could look down and try to find out what's up. And looking downwards, he could see a table on the ground. But the moment he reaches there down, he sees, it's not a table. I saw it looked like a table. So what appears initially at face value is, in Bertrand Rousseau's philosophy, not necessarily the truth. In other words, he was talking like the English saying that says that what glitters, it's not gold. Yes, what you see glittering, looking attractive like gold, is not necessarily so. So, to quote him, allow me to quote him, he says, let me just get a speech. Is there any knowledge in the world which is so certain that no reasonable man could doubt it? This question, which at first sight might not seem difficult, is really one of the most difficult that can be asked. When we have realized the obstacles in the way of the straightforward and confident answer, we shall be well launched on the study of philosophy. For philosophy is merely the attempt to answer such ultimate questions, not carelessly and dogmatically, as we do in ordinary life, and even in the sciences, but critically after exploring all that makes such questions puzzling, and after realizing all the vagueness and confusion that underlie our ordinary ideas. By turning my head, I see out of the window buildings, and crowns and the sun. By turning my head, I see out of the window buildings and crowns and the sun. I believe that the sun is about 93 million miles from the earth, that it is a hot globe many times bigger than the earth, that owing to the earth's rotation, it rises every morning and will continue to do so for an indefinite time in the future. I believe that if any other normal person comes into my room, he will see the chairs and table and books and papers as I see, and that the table which I see is the same as the table which I feel pressing against my arm. All this seems to be so evident as to be hardly worth stating, except in answer to a man who doubts whether I know anything. Yet all this may be reasonably doubted, and all of it requires much careful discussion before we can be sure that we have stated it in a form that is wholly true. In other words, Bertrand Russell is urging us to cross-examine things, to recheck what we know, what we think, what we have heard, what we have been hearing. You don't take it as face value. We are going to lose intellectuality. Intellectuals are people who do experiment when they hear something. They don't rush to say, so and so is this or that, so and so has gotten this or is this, or I hand with a drunkard saying this or the other. No, 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 no. It can be the work of a drunkard. It can be the work of a mad person. It can be work of an enemy. It can be a work of a friend who want to misrepresent his friend, hoping that will raise and give some mileage or sorts. So it is good, as he tells us, to understand what appears is not necessarily real. We need to examine empirically, do a research on those things we hear. And that is when we uphold our intellectuality. Intellectuals must keep discipline of academia. So why study the works of Bertrand Russell? Now, in his works on appearance and reality, Russell views philosophy as merely the attempt to answer such ultimate question as, can I know anything? Not carelessly and dogmatically, as we do in ordinary life and even in science, but critically. Generally, the term appearance is used in the first instance to refer to what our five senses, touch, smell, taste, sight, and hearing, provide us when we are in contact with the world around us. Thus, what appears to us is what we perceive via parts of our physical bodies. Okay? That is the body surface, nose, tongue, eyes, and ears. In normal circumstances, we would answer the question, do I know anything? Would answer it positively, referring to the content of what our senses yield when we perceive our immediate environment. What appears is therefore taken to be what it is. Nevertheless, this is indeed problematic because what appears differs from one person to the next and from time to time for the same person. When then are our appearances constant and real? Now, if we decide to call what is reality, what is it? And what is the relationship between appearance and reality? Certainly, this is a problem that Bertrand Russell addresses by way of critical and creative thinking. So it is a question of being critical and creative that we shall unveil so many questions that before us. Now, coming to this other character, Rene Descartes, we talked about him in the introduction section. I just do the same. I introduce again. Rene Descartes, written as Rene Descartes, but in French the S is silent, so they talk about Rene Descartes, 1596 to 1650. That's when he lived. So he lived before Bertrand Russell, John Stuart Mill, Kwasi Wiredu, all those fellows we have discussed. But he is actually the father of Western capitalism, Western philosophy. Yes, John Beatty is the father of African philosophy when he said, I am because you are. For this guy, he went through 3 meditations. He first asked himself a question, how can I tell I exist? And in the course of asking himself how he can tell that he exists, he went through 3 meditations. I don't want to get into it. I'll review the material to look at it. he came up with the conclusion after the third attempt that if I can feel the pain, the hunger, that I'm still there, after all those torture, he could deny himself food and other things. And he could feel the pain of denials or denying himself those things that one needs. He came up with that conclusion that I am because I exist. Cogito ergo sum. That is, I am, therefore I exist. And that became the father of modern capitalism, where you think individually. But the issue is he's a critical thinker. That is the only good thing with Rene Descartes. The Rene Descartes, let's call him Rene Descartes here, whatever others call him, that is not neither here nor there. He shows how critical thinking can bring discovery. Even when you are alone, individually, you can discover things alone, not necessarily asking people questions. You can think and think and think and come up with a conclusion. So thinking for thinking and for thinking is a way to live. If we suppress thinking in the name of faith or religion or anything, we fail. We normally say faith without reason is faulty, or is philosophically faulty, or it can't go far. We need faith and reason. They should be work hand in hand, and that's when we are done. So that is the issue before us here, and that is Rene Descartes for you. And he came up with that cogito ergo sum, I think, therefore I am, which say it's a philosophical proposition with a simple meaning that you can doubt your existence in order to understand whether you are there. He doubted whether he exists. In and of itself, he proved that I exist to do the doubting. If I can exist to do the doubting, then I am there. Now, if somebody asks you to tell me how sure you are existing, what can you tell me? Some will not even have answers, but this guy went through the whole hog alone. Now, this proposition of cogito ergo sum became a fundamental element of Western philosophy, as it was perceived to form a foundation for raw knowledge. While other knowledge could be a figment of imagination, deception, or mystic, the very act of doubting one's own existence arguably serves as proof of the reality of one's own existence, or at least one's thought. Descartes' original phrase appeared in his discourse on the method, which he wrote in 1637, and which was written in French rather than Latin to reach a wider audience in his country than scholars. He used the Latin cogito ergo sum in the Rata Principles of Philosophy in 1644, and the argument is popularly known in the English-speaking world as the cogito ergo sum argument, or more briefly as the cogito. The phrase cogito ergo sum is not used in Descartes' meditation on first philosophy, but the term the cogito is used to refer to an argument from it. And in the meditations, Descartes phrases the conclusion of the argument is that the proposition I exist is necessarily true whenever it is put forward by me or conceived in my mind. At the beginning of the second meditation, having reached what he considered to be ultimate level of doubt, his argument from the existence of a deceiving God, Descartes examined his beliefs to see if any have survived the doubt, and in his belief in his own existence, he finds that it is impossible to doubt that he exists, even if there were a deceiving God or an evil demon. One's belief in their own existence would be secure, for there is no way one would be deceived unless one existed in order to be deceived. So it's a long argument that he developed that brought him to where he came up with. So in his meditation, the doubt aspects of the method was applied by suspending his belief in anything in which Descartes could find or even imagine the slightest ground for doubt. This was because Descartes had grown up uncritically accepting many opinions which could be false. Upon reflective or reflection, Descartes suspended belief in all his previous beliefs, counting none, including belief in his own body, immune from well-founded doubt. Thus, Descartes used methodical doubt to discover the indubitable truth, I am, I exist, something which he found true whenever he uttered or conceived that expression in his mind. And he took this as a true foundation of knowledge. It is this demonstration of indubitability of his existence that established Descartes as the first great philosopher of the modern age. So he began by doubting. So in critical thinking, doubting is very, very important, because it is in doubting that we can go very far. In doubting, we can go very, very far. In doubting, we can go very far. We don't doubt because we want to be bad guys. Am I seeing us losing network? Oh, sorry, we're having problem with the network? Oh, sorry. Okay, let me finish. Now, when we think of Cartesian theory, we say Cartesian theory contradicts African philosophies of interdependence. You can debate that. Does Cartesian theory contradict African philosophies? Because we also have African philosophies, Ubuntu philosophies, particularly well propounded from the Zulu ethnic group in South Africa, which talks of Ubuntu. In Kenya we have Omondo. In Kiswahili we have other Kenyan languages apart from Omondo. Even there is Umundu. There is also Utu in Kiswahili. There is also humane in English. That humanness, philosophies of communality and community and caring for one another, that were there in indigenous Africa. Now, some people have disputed that Africa does not have philosophy. Philosophy came with the West or the European scholars. That is not true. If philosophy is about reasoning and thinking, we were thinking beings. African peoples were thinking. They may not have been doing it using the canons of the West, but the African perspective of philosophizing, because it's thinking wisely, thinking wisdom, thinking deeply, critical thinking, creative thinking. That is all philosophizing. So Cartesian theory is a theory by Rene Descartes, which you call it the cogitos, or the cogitos argument, or the cogito ergo sum. So it's a fallacy to say there were no philosophies in Africa. The issue is, with the coming of Western education, we needed to do a comparative analysis so that we can learn something from the West and the West can learn something from us. So African philosophies of survival are grounded on the fact that no one is an island of himself or herself. Rather, each and everyone is part of the whole. In turn, the whole concept of interdependence agreed with Pauline theology on the need to recognize other people's gifts and talents in order to edify the society in general. And this concept of hospitality, which is hospitable, was originally expressed in the songs, dances, stories, drama, the customs and institutions of the African people. As a philosophy of the African peoples, especially in the ancient times, it is well summed up in John Beatty's I am because we are, and since we are, therefore I am, which is an existential cognita sum ego sumus, meaning I am related, therefore we are. John Beatty's summary of the African philosophy is sharply opposed to I am, therefore I exist. That is the Cartesian cogito ergo sum by Rene Descartes. the French philosopher, who can be said to have summed up the Western philosophy. And you can see many proverbs, African proverbs, who express this communalistic and Ubuntu philosophy of life, this humane philosophy of life, the philosophies of caring, where they say one log does not make a bridge. Okay? Another one that says things are interdependent. Ido nikole midhania. Wealth comes by working together. In other ones, and another one, gutire gitatuirie kingi, is an African proverb. All things are interdependent. Nobody can be able to say, I can live without other people. The way Descartes told us, he proved he exists without consulting anybody. He forgot that even naming himself, he didn't name himself. Even if he was baptized somewhere in a church or something. So we talk about communalistic. Now, the last philosopher for today and the last one for practical, we may come and look at something else next week and try to sum it up for you to have ample time for preparing for term paper and assignment, for those who have not finished particular assignment or term paper. I want to talk about Kwasi Wiredu. Kwasi Wiredu is a Ghanaian philosopher, and from this old Gold Coast, now we call it Ghana, born 1931, attended Adisado College from 1948 to 1952. It was during this period that he discovered philosophy through Plato, which weaned him from his interest in practical psychology and Bertrand Rousseau, and he gained a place at the University of Ghana, Legon. After graduating in 1958, he went to University College, Oxford, to read for the Bachelor of Philosophy degree. At Oxford, Wiredu was taught by Gilbert Lyle, and who was also his thesis supervisor. Peter Strawson, his college tutor, and Stuart Hampshire, his special tutor, and wrote a thesis on knowledge, truth, and reason. Upon graduating in 1960, he was appointed to a teaching post at the University College of North Staffordshire, now the University of Kiel, where he stayed for a year. He then returned to Ghana, Africa, where he accepted a teaching post for philosophy in his old University of Ghana. He remained at the University of Ghana for 23 years, during which time he became first head of department and then professor. Since 1987, he holds a professorship at the University of South Florida in Tampa. Wiredu has held a number of visiting professorships, so many I can't get a CV there. But I want to tell you about this man. His argument in critical and creative thinking is that philosophy is not useless. Philosophy is not theoretical. Philosophy is useful for everybody. And he tells us philosophy has a very critical function. There are those who are dismissing philosophy as nothing but theoretical. We need agriculture. We need to study agriculture. We need to study chemistry and practical sciences. We need physical science. We don't need philosophy, but we need philosophy. It's actually the mother and the father of academia. Everything started by Socratic questioning, where Socrates taught people, particularly the Western education, we had African education. He taught people to ask many questions so that they can know more. So if you ask many questions, you know more. But if you don't ask questions, you not know enough. So Kwasi Wiredu tells us philosophy is important and gives us many examples. I'm just summarizing it because you have material to read and more. That when you want to build a house, you first theorize it in your mind. You build it in your mind. When you want to buy a car, you may not even have a loan or money. but you may think of where to get a loan, who can give me, in the course of thinking, you may even get a friend who could do it individually, and never know, you never know. So that is it. That is all about philosophizing, thinking through and wisely and logically. It takes you far. A society that does not prepare people to philosophize, to think through critically and creatively and innovatively, that society is bound to fail and can't go far. What we need, even for the parliamentary positions that we are about to take place in the country, even presidential, we need a person. Even MCA, we don't need, honestly, we need these people who are educated. Because only an educated person can see far, can show us the way, as Kwasi Wiredu will show. Because an educated person, whether he's a student of philosophy or not, he has a critical mind that can philosophize and help us focus on the next 100 years. Failure to focus on the function of philosophy as a philosophizing or a forum of triggering critical and creative thinking and innovation will fail us because we will elect people who are dwarfs, people who have not been to school but they have money. What suffers is the future because they will think about themselves. Such people cannot plan for your future because they don't have enough theory, philosophical theory, to think for you and plan for your great grandchildren to come. So that is the position of Wiredu. Philosophy is not useless. It helps us see the next years to come. This Vision 2060, Vision 2030, Millennium Development Goals, Sustainable Development Goals, they cannot be worked out. You cannot draw that blueprint unless you are educated enough. Otherwise, there are limitations that can only be settled here in academia, in a university like this one. So Wiredu's view of the function of philosophy is that it has a definite role to contribute to intellectual and social changes, influencing modernization in contemporary Africa. And in his essay, What Can Philosophy Do for Africa? An essay that has captured the imagination and attention of so many people, I included, which appears from his influential book, Philosophy and African Culture, 1980, published by Cambridge University Press. Kwasi Wiredu appears to answer his critics who accuse philosophy of being merely academic and not practical and engaged in splitting hairs, what we call splitting hairs. Scholars have been accused of splitting hairs, and therefore a luxury, especially in the third world and in particular Africa. Wiredu argues that the right orientation for pursuing philosophy in Africa is of the most practical importance for an action by any individual or group of individuals for needs to be guided by ideas, and philosophy attempts to elucidate the most fundamental of such ideas. Likewise, Bertrand, who inspired in one way or the other, or who could compare notes with Kwasi Wiredu in his philosophy, has pointed out in this book, Problems of Philosophy, that the criticism of that philosophy is not practical arises from the wrong conception of the kind of goods which philosophy strives to achieve. What we wrongly call practical man or practical woman, as Rousseau observes, is one who recognizes only material needs, who realizes that humanity must have food for the body, but is oblivious of the necessity of providing food for the mind. In view of this, philosophy by its very nature nurtures the mind and has the critical function, deliberately resisting the tendency to take things for granted. It questions assumptions. It questions philosophy, questions beliefs, assumption, beliefs, and habits, breaking with traditional way of thinking and making us better place as thinking beings for human well-being. So when philosophy makes us thinking beings, it helps us to plan for various vision 2030, vision 200 years to come. And we can plan these things for generations to come. But when we take philosophy away in the name of being pragmatists, studying practical courses, okay, and buying things, equipment from the West, and not provoking our minds to think of how we can make our own, and we can use our raw materials to make our own weapons, make our own working tools, our own tractors, and all that. That is the beginning of everything. That is the end of us. That is the end of us. So we will stop there because time is over. But one can ask 1 or 2 questions. Then we call it a day. Next week we try very hard to push these things and let you go on with it. Thank you very much.